left McDougall for Sunrise. He left McDougall in company with Timothy Brown, and arrived at Sunrise by himself. Further, it was known that they had quarreled just previous to pulling out, for the Lizzie, a wheezy 10-ton steer wheeler, 24 hours behind him, beat Leclerc in by 3 days, and when he did get in, it was with a clean drilled bullet hole through his shoulder muscle and a tale of ambush and murder. A strike had been made at Sunrise, and things had changed considerably. With the infusion of several hundred gold seekers, a deal of whiskey, and a half-dozen equipped gamblers, the missionary had seen the page of his years of labor with the Indians wiped clean. When the squaws became preoccupied with cooking beans and keeping the fire going for the wifeless miners, and the bucks with swapping their warm furs for the black bottles and broken timepieces, he took to his bed, said, "Bless me," several times, and departed to his final accounting in a rough-hewn oblong box. Whereupon the gamblers moved their roulette and Fargo tables into the mission house, and the click of chips and clink of glasses went up from dawn till dark, and to dawn again. Now Timothy Brown was well beloved among these adventurers of the North. The one thing against him was his quick temper and ready fist, a little thing, for which his kind heart and forgiving hand more than atoned. On the other hand, there was nothing to atone for Black Leclerc. He was black. As more than one remembered, deed bore witness, he was as well hated as the other was beloved. So the men of Sunrise put an antiseptic dressing on his shoulder and hauled him before Judge Lynch. It was a simple affair. He had quarreled with Timothy Brown at McDougall. With Timothy Brown he had left McDougall. Without Timothy Brown he had arrived at Sunrise. Considered in the light of his evilness, the unanimous conclusion was that he had killed Timothy Brown. On the other hand, Leclerc acknowledged their facts, but challenged their conclusion, and gave his own explanation. 20 miles out of Sunrise, he and Timothy Brown were poling the boat along the rocky shore. From that shore, 2 rifle shots rang out. Timothy Brown pitched out of the boat and went down bubbling red, and that was the last of Timothy Brown. He, Leclerc, pitched into the bottom of the boat with a stinging shoulder. He lay very quiet, peeping at the shore. After a time, 2 Indians stuck up their heads and came out to the water's edge, carrying between them a birch bark canoe. As they launched it, Leclerc let fly. He potted one, who went over the side after the manner of Timothy Brown. The other dropped into the bottom of the canoe, and then canoe and poling boat went down the stream in a drifting battle. After that they hung up on a split current, and the canoe passed on one side of an island and the poling boat on the other. That was the last of the canoe, and he came into Sunrise. Yes, from the way the Indian in the canoe jumped, he was sure he had potted him. That was all. This explanation was not deemed adequate. They gave him 10 hours' grace, while the Lizzie steamed down to investigate. 10 hours later, she came wheezing back to Sunrise. There had been nothing to investigate. No evidence had been found to back up his statements. They told him to make his will, for he possessed a $50,000 Sunrise claim, and they were a law-abiding as well as a law-giving breed. Leclerc shrugged his shoulders. "But one thing," he said, "a leetle what you call a favor, a leetle favor, dat is et. I gif my $50,000 to de church. I gif my husky dog, Batard, to the devil. De little favor, fears you hang him, and den you hang me. It is good, eh?" Good it was, they agreed, that hell's spawn should break trail for his master across the last divide, and the court was adjourned down to the river bank, where a big spruce tree stood by itself. Slackwater Charley put a hangman's knot in the end of a hauling line, and the noose was slipped over Leclere's head and pulled tight around his neck. His hands were tied behind his back, and he was assisted to the top of a cracker box. Then the running end of the line was passed over an overhanging branch, drawn taut and made fast. To kick the box out from under would leave him dancing on the air. "Now for the dog," said Webster Shaw, sometime mining engineer. "You'll have to rope him, Slackwater." Leclere grinned. Slackwater took a chew of tobacco, rove a running noose, and proceeded leisurely to coil a few turns in his hand. He paused once or twice to brush particularly offensive mosquitoes from off his face. Everybody was brushing mosquitoes except Leclere, about whose head a small cloud was visible. Even Batard, lying full stretched on the ground with his forepaws, rubbed the pests away from his eyes and mouth. But while Slackwater waited for Batard to lift his head, a faint call came from the quiet air, and a man was seen waving his arms and running across the flat from Sunrise. It was the storekeeper. "Call her off, boys," he panted as he came in among them. "Little Sandy and Bernadette's just got back in," he explained with returning breath. "Landed down below and come up by the short cut. Got the beaver with him. Picked him up in his canoe, stuck in a back channel, with a couple of bullet holes in him. Other buck was clock clothes, the one that knocked spots out of his squaw and dusted." "Eh? What? Eh say? Eh?" Leclere cried exultantly. "Dat de one, fo sho. I know. I spike true." "The thing to do is to teach these damned Shishwashes a little manners," spoke Webster Shaw. "They're getting fat and sassy, and we'll have to bring 'em down a peg. Round in all the bucks and string up the beaver for an object lesson. That's the program. Come on, let's see what he's got to say for himself." "Hey, Monsieur," Leclere called, as the crowd began to melt away through the twilight in the direction of Sunrise. "I like ver much to see de fun." "Oh, we'll turn you loose when we come back," Webster Shaw shouted over his shoulder. "In the meantime, meditate on your sins and the ways of Providence. It will do you good, so be grateful." As is the way with men who are accustomed to great hazards, whose nerves are healthy and trained in patience, so it was with Leclere, who settled himself to the long wait, which is to say that he reconciled his mind to it. There was no settling of the body, for the taut rope forced him to stand rigidly erect. The least relaxation of the leg muscle pressed the rough fibered noose into his neck, while the upright position caused him much pain in his wounded shoulder. He projected his upper lip and expelled his breath upwards along his face to blow the mosquitoes away from his eyes. But the situation had its compensation. To be snatched from the maw of death was well worth a little bodily suffering, only it was unfortunate that he should miss the hanging of the beaver. And so he mused till his eyes chanced to fall upon Batard, head between forepaws and stretched on the ground asleep. And there Leclere ceased to muse. He studied the animal closely, striving to sense if the sleep were real or feigned. Batard's sides were heaving regularly, but Leclere felt that the breath came and went a shade too quickly. Also, he felt that there was a vigilance or alertness to every hair that belied unshackling sleep. He would have given his Sunrise claim to be assured that the dog was not awake, and once, when one of his joints creaked, he looked quickly and guiltily at Batard to see if he roused. He did not rouse, but a few minutes later He got up slowly and lazily.